Well, let's talk about the moon and fish. Dean, the impact of the moon, does it really impact the fish? Is die vis met die maan gepla? Is it just a myth or is there some truth in it?
Werner, when you initially posed the question to me and you asked me to come speak about it, I wasn't sure what I was going to talk about because the moon doesn't affect fishing at all.
Okay, well, let's go home, let's braai.
So should we start right? All right, no. On a serious note, Werner, it's a complex subject, and I'm going to try and simplify it as much as I can. And there's factual information about the moon and moon phases, and then there's also theory. So I'm going to try and match both of those for you. So
Do you think on that point that there's facts and there's theory and there's a bit of myth as well? Do you think there's a couple of beliefs that doesn't hold water?
Look, so I don't believe people turn into werewolves on full moon.
Not
So
yet.
I suppose the myth is out there that it happens. I don't believe in that. So no, I think the rest of it is quite sound.
Okay.
But in principle, I want to just put it out there before I launch the conversation this evening. It's a tool. It's something to think about. Fishing itself is quite a complex game in the sense that there's a whole host of layers of information that you've got to bring together. And when you bring it together, everything happens sweet. And sometimes you get some of it together and you're a bit late. Other times you get it all sweet and the results are fantastic. So before we start, I want to say any day is a good day to go fishing.
Yeah, well, it's better than sitting in the office.
It's better than a day in the office, and it's definitely better than the Joburg traffic I've just been in. So don't become disheartened in what I share this evening. Rather use it as another tool in your armory when you want to plan a trip. And when I say when you want to plan a trip, here I also allowed shout out to all large competition organizers. I think South Africa is very bad in planning its major events. When you got tools like this available to you, I think in you're asking people to take annual leave or special leave to come and do a tournament, if you apply a filter or two, you can actually shift the result of that tournament. And it's a thing I've been boxing for many years with various organized angling activities, but on full calendars,
yeah,
it's not that easy.
It's not that easy. Yeah. But so what you're saying is you can have better results or poorer results based on the moon and what the moon
Absolutely.
Is. Does it also mean that when you're on a bad moon weekend, you just have to think about fishing a little bit different? Or what does it really mean? Does it mean stay at home or just change your approach a bit?
Yeah, so, and again, that's why I said I'm putting the caveat out there. Every day is a good day to go fishing. Some of us can only go fishing when we get the opportunity, go. All right. Some of us can plan the trip. And if you're going to plan it, then bring the factors in, have a good look at it. And especially if you're doing those bucket list trips where you want to go catch something big or you're going to travel to another continent to go catch it, do the preparation. It's not about the flight ticket and the hotel. There's a lot more that you can do behind that. So let me get into it.
Okay, let's start with the theory.
So I think first and foremost, to all the viewers out there, this has come from years and years of me playing around and documenting various information. Today, you can go onto any app or most apps, and at a press of a button, you'd have the information. I was already using this 20 years back, 2005, in the World Championships in Belgium. People subsequent to that, a lot of people would contact me and ask me if I would share my stuff with them. And the answer was no. And because it was hard yards and lots of research that I did. But what I would do is I would say, when are you fishing? And I'd send them a snapshot. And you'll understand that just now when I show you the graphs and the pictures and explain how it works, of when they were fishing, and then they could think about what they wanted to do. I've helped a lot of big trophy fishermen with it over the years. Johan Donald, if he's watching tonight, shout out to Johan. Johan would often phone me from, and he's a monster carp angler, right? He'd phone me from a venue and he'd say, I'm really battling. And I'd say to him, wait, where are you? Have a quick chat, pull up the information. I said to him, Johan, don't worry, you can put your lines out at time X, expect the runs by time Y. and I'd get the feedback from him when it happened. And he was basically part of the research pool. He'd give me the day, the time of the day, and the size of the fish. Okay. So when we get into it, I'm just going to remind people about a couple of basics. Fishing has got an array of factors that affect it. Weather affects it. Cold front. Pressure, barometric pressure. High pressure, low pressure, rising pressure, falling pressure. In terms of, we all know that the sunrise and sunset has got a natural sort of time period around those two. That's actually the
golden hour thing.
That's the golden hour thing, but that's the solar calendar. Solar meaning sun, and I'll integrate that in a moment when I get to the end of it. Then the lunar calendar, which is the moon calendar, and the moon goes through various phases. We'll talk about that in a moment. And then the fundamental basics of high tides, low tides, neap tides, spring tides. Why do they happen? And everybody thinks it's one and the same thing. It's actually not. It's a whole array of variables. And when they all fall into alignment and you hit sweet spots, you can have fantastic results. You can go out on the best lunar time and you can hit a high pressure cold front and you're not going to catch a fish. Okay, so there's many factors that come into it. But when you can plan, and one thing you can do is plan around the moon. So as a reminder, the Earth itself, right, sits on an axis. So if you envision the Earth sort of between my hands here, it sits on the axis, and that axis is slightly tilted and it's rotating. And premised on that, we understand what gravity is. Okay, 9.81. It's a general pull towards the center of the Earth. If we didn't have it, we would be floating off to outer space. Okay. Unfortunately, gravity plays a factor when we cast, and it tends to bring the lead down sooner than we'd like it. But you've got the Earth that's rotating, and then you've got the moon that is rotating around the Earth. Okay. So on this axis, the moon goes around the Earth once in 24 hours and 50 minutes. Odd, our day is 24 hours long, right? But the moon cycle is 24 hours and 50 minutes. So what that means is your moon cycle phases will continue to change throughout the year. I'm going to explain the phases in a moment. So if you visualize that, you've got the Earth there, and you've got this moon that is orbiting around the Earth. The Earth, this little ball that we all live on, is rotating around a bigger thing called the sun. Okay? So the sun is stationary, but we going around the sun. And whilst we going around the sun, this moon is going around us. Okay, so that's why there's impacts between solar and lunar on the Earth. Okay. Will you put up the slide on the moon phases, please? So if I'm speaking to those who understand all of this, then I apologize. But I think the basics are, when we look at the moon phases, now there's many phases in the moon. I'll talk to them in a moment. But in principle, for me, there's only three. What do you mean there's only three? Well, there's a full moon, and there's a new moon, and there's everything else in between.
Okay. That goes in between.
Yeah, that's the waxing and the waning, the first quarter to the third quarter. So
in fact, the moon is always the same. It's just what we see.
Exactly. So I don't know if we can step out of the slideshow for a moment. I just want to explain something with my hands again. I don't know if that is possible. It looks like it is, right? So to Vadner's point, the moon is always visible. Okay, it's always there, right? So how come is it sometimes it's black, we don't see it, and sometimes it's a full moon, or sometimes it's something in between? So remember what I said, we're rotating around the sun. When the moon is between, if that's the Earth, that's the moon, and that's the sun. When the moon is directly aligned through to the sun, we see what we call the new moon. It's a dark moon.
It's the shadow of the Earth on the moon.
Well, actually, it's just the shadow of the moon.
Oh.
Because the light
is on the other side.
The sun's on the other side, right? So you actually can't see the moon, but the moon's there. But it's a new moon. In other words, it's a perfectly round moon, but you just can't see it. That is actually when the gravitational force on the Earth is the most. Why? Because then the sun's gravitational force, which is about 1/3, and the moon is about 2/3. Some people will argue it's 2.5 times, but to make things simple, sun 1/3, moon 2/3. Moon is stronger because it's closer to the Earth, sun because it's further from the Earth. But when they align,
they work together.
They work together. So that's when you get your maximum tide. So now if I say the Earth is like this, And remember, there's water around the entire Earth, right? I'm just showing it to the viewers. So when the sun and the moon are perfectly aligned, you can almost see this thing being compressed, right? So there's more pull on the outsides, hence why you get a higher tide called a spring tide, and why you get a lower tide, in terms of highs and lows. When the moon is on this side of the Earth and the sun is on that side of the Earth, that's when you see the full moon. Because now the whole side of the moon is lit and you can see it from the Earth, and that's called the full moon. So I think most discussions in terms of does the moon affect fishing goes around these two, full moon and new moon. Reason being because that's when there's the maximum effect on the Earth. Any other point, okay, so from the dark moon, which is the new moon, as it starts to rotate around the Earth in time, as the 24 hours, 50 minutes, 24 hours, 50 minutes goes along, you'll get they call it the waxing, and you'll see the first quarter starting to come into effect. First quarter then migrates through to a full moon migrates to a third quarter, and then it goes back to a dark moon. When the moon is directly above or below us, in other words, its first quarter or its third quarter, is when it has the least impact on us. So yes, there's gravity working there, but there's also gravity working from the sun. So remember I said it looks like it's flattened?
So it's putting it back a bit.
So correct. So that's when you get what they call the neap tides, when the high tide and the low tide is not much differential. Now, why am I talking about tides? And we're talking about freshwater fishing, right? And does the moon have an impact on it? So you'll recall I said to you that barometric pressure, as we know, has an impact on fish, right? Why does barometric pressure have it? And you'll see how these dots join back in a moment. Why does barometric pressure have impact on a fish? Fish, whether they're in the sea or freshwater, have a swim bladder. The bigger the fish, and I'm going to share tonight specifically, I'm talking about big fish. All fishing is incorporated in this, but big fish in particular. The bigger the swim bladder, if there's a shift in barometric pressure, okay, for those who don't know what barometric pressure is, it is the mass, the weight of the air expressed on a square meter surface area on water. Okay, so the heavier the air, the heavier the pressure, because the footprint doesn't become bigger, the footprint remains constant. The thinner the air, the less the mass, okay, the less the barometric pressure. Okay, so in principle, what is happening when your tides are changing, either there's more water or there's less water. Okay, but the swim bladder of the fish says, well, I want to be in equilibrium and I want to be comfortable. So hence, whether it's a cold front causing barometric pressures to go up or down, or the moon, by where we are in the cycle, that swim bladder in that fish either wants to expand, which says the fish, I'm uncomfortable, I don't like this, or it becomes compressed and it says, I don't like this. Okay, that influences a few things in the fish. It influences where the fish will be in the water column, because remember, the fish wants to be neutral, wants to be comfortable. Okay?
Yeah.
And at the same time, it will influence, the only other way the fish can combat that is it's got to put more gas into its swim bladder. Okay, in other words, so it's either got to get gas out or gas in to become comfortable again under the change in pressure. So how do they get gas in or out? They've got to ingest, digest, and they can use the gases that come through that process to either. Okay, right. Now, where are we going on the moon?
Okay, so can we break a little bit for that and continue that after this? So that's what we have time for in this session.